Welcome back everybody. In this video we're going to be looking at this prototype I've just created. This was voted on by my patrons. It is an Advanced Wars gameplay style prototype. It's kind of ripped off the logo. It's called Turn-Based Strategy and it is a prototype as it says. So if we begin, it says our mission is to destroy the monster. We are now in a point and click scene where we can control this arrow. If we try and click on the dino, nothing happens. We click on our tank here, we can then move, attack, or cancel. If we press cancel, it prompts us that if we press select, we can end our turn. We can either move or attack. If we press attack and then we click on the dino, it basically says the dino's out of range. But if we press move, we can now move. And you can't move through mountains and you can't move through the river. So now the tank is out of moves, we have to press shift, which is select obviously on the Game Boy, to end our turn. And then we basically obviously say yes. And then the dino moves, and because it's out of range, it doesn't attack. And so now it's our turn to move again. The tank has 2 moves, so we can move twice. Now the tank is out of moves. We still can't attack. I'll show you what happens when you do try and attack out of range. It obviously says, once you do attack, it will be the end of your turn. Are you sure you want to attack? We just say yes. So if we click on the dino, it's out of range. So we have to press select to end our turn. Say yes. And the dino moves. And then we can move again. And then because we're now in range of the dinosaur, we have a 2-tile range. Are you sure you want to attack? Yes. And then we can click on him. And then its health goes down to 6. And it says the dino is out of range and can't attack you. But now the dino has just moved to in range, and the dino is now attacking, so he gets to go first, and brings our health down to 3, and then we bring its health down to 4. And now if we move, we can move up here, and we can attack it from up here. Sure you want to attack? We say yes, and then we can select him. We're now attacking. Fantastic. So if I was to just move and then not do anything, obviously I'm putting myself at a disadvantage. So let's see what he does. Dino is attacking and brings our health down to 1, and obviously it kills him. So we kill the dino and we win. We get taken back to the start. I will be making these files available to my patrons. I'll now quickly run through how I got to this point, both for those who want to make something similar, and I'll also be providing some tips at the end for if you were to either, make your own turn-based strategy game, or if you were going to advance this prototype that I'm giving to my patrons. So obviously to begin, there's actually a lot of stats I had to set. So for example, there's player health, player max health, player damage, and then the enemy health, the enemy damage, the enemy speed, the player speed. And that's also referring to the moves. There's also some variables to check if it has attacked or not. Basically, I'm just setting these all to the correct stats. And for example, things like the enemy moves remaining and the health will be set to the enemy max health and the enemy speed, right? So some things are set to the max number. And obviously, in this prototype, there are only 2 things, and you are only controlling 1 object. And I will discuss some tips for, increasing the amount at the end of this video. So first of all, we have 2 maps, and this is because one is a point and click scene and one is the top-down 2D where there's collision and the objects are moving. I did try to have it all in one, but it didn't work as I intended and it wasn't as clean as I had hoped. So I split them up and it did make it more simpler. So first things first, we have this turn display at the very top here, and basically it just checks which turn it is. So when the value is 1, it's the player's turn. When the value is 2, it's the enemy's turn, and it basically just sets the correct frame of that animation, of that sprite, sorry. We then have on the initiate of the scene, we have press B to cancel the attack and press select to end turn. Obviously these aren't really useful until you have clicked on the tank. If you click on the tank, you're basically choosing the tank and it's asking you, do you want to choose the tank? And there isn't currently a variable that, select tank 1. So that would be something that you would have to be improved upon. if everybody wants me to improve upon it, I would happily improve upon it. This is just like the first prototype, and obviously if you guys like it, then I can make it better for you if necessary. So once you've chosen the attack, and you can choose either move, attack, or cancel. If you press move, it takes you to this move map. But if you press attack, you basically get to click on the dino, obviously. And then when you click on the dino, you're then asked, do you want to attack the dino? And if that's true, and you're in range, then you get taken to this scene. And I'll come back to that scene in a minute. But if it's not in range, it's basically checking the position of the tank versus the position of the dino and comparing it to the player range and also the enemy range to see if it can attack back. Let's move on to the move map. So if you press move, it basically takes you here, and you then have control of this tank. The cursor is set to the bottom here and hidden, and obviously it is setting the positions because at the very beginning of the when the scene initiates, it needs to have stored the positions of the actors previously in this scene before we change scene, and then at the beginning of this scene we set the positions so that when we move around, when we go back, it's setting the position to the correct place. And because there are only 2 actors as well, it means that once one dies, it means the game is over. So it's very simple. If there were 2 player tanks, I would have to change how it works for that. And I would definitely expand upon that if necessary. So when the scene starts, it basically checks if it's the player's turn. It gives the player this power to move either up, down, left, or right with this tank. And then let's say you try and move into this wall. Because there's collision, it then checks to see where you were and where you are now. If it's the same value, then it doesn't count as a move. The amount of moves you have is, determined at the very beginning. Once you do move, it removes a move. So let's say we move down, that's 1 move less, and we only have 2 moves, so 1 more move, and that would be both moves done. If we were to move here, then move back, that also counts as 2 moves, and I would want to work on that in the future, but I don't exactly know an elegant way of coding that in. So once the players move, obviously, they can press select, and they'll stop moving and get taken back to here so they can attack if they're close enough. If it's the enemy's turn, if they come into the scene and it's actually turn 2, meaning the enemy's turn, the dino here basically tries to move left, right, then down, and then up, but only if it will move them closer to the player. And they only have 1 move, so once one of these is done, they can't do another one. So the AI is very simple. Having more complex enemies would be very hard, I think, especially stacking these up, and imagine having multiple dinos. It could get very complicated very quickly. And yeah, so once they've moved, they can't move again, and then if they're in range to the player, they will then check to fight. If they can fight, it then takes them to this scene here. So this is the fight scene. We hide the cursor again, and then we set has attack to false to make sure. And then after a second, if the player is attacking first, meaning that they chose to attack, then they do their attack. And then if the enemy is in range, and that's either by them attacking themselves or by checking when we attack, if they're in range, then they will then fight and then do damage to us. And then if we didn't attack first, it will then make us attack. And then it sets our moves back to the max because it's the end of the turn, and setting it to false, and then setting the correct turn based on which turn it is right now, and then moving us back to the correct scene based on whose turn it should be. And then obviously if one of these healths gets to 0, and obviously because because it is in order where either the player attacks first or the dino attacks first, it checks to see if the health is 0, and if the health is 0, it says you either won or lost and sends you back here. So it sounds simple, but I went through a lot to get here. It took me a long time, and there was a lot of trial and error, and I will now go through the tips that I would give to you if you wanted to do this yourself or expand upon it yourself. The first thing I found when I was testing is that it was easier to have a top-down 2D map where the characters move, and then a point-and-click map where the character, or the player gets to select what happens. And I would, if I was to expand it, let's say I wanted to have a vehicle that couldn't go through trees, I would want to have a duplicate of this move map where the collision is covering the trees as well. And I think that would be a problem with, let's say you had 10 different units. I would not recommend on having tons and tons of units. The point and click scenes are often designated to this size. You could obviously figure out a way to have a trigger on the edge of the thing that when you go to the edge, you can select it and move the camera, but you don't want to be having triggers on, like over the map. So it becomes questionable as to how you might go about operating a point and click scene in larger maps than this. So that would be something as well that would hold you back, that you would have to test around with. And I can obviously do that testing if necessary. One weird thing I found while I was testing is that although I've set this to 16 by 16 in the settings, if you go down to top-down 2D in the settings, you see 16 pixel grid. Even though I set that, it still works in the 8x8 grid, okay? So when I say move down, I'm actually moving it down by 2. And when I'm doing the calculations, you know, let's say this dino is here and this is here. This is, although it's like 2 tiles technically, it's still 4, right? There's still, if we calculate from the left of this to the left of this, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 tiles. And it's kind of confusing that the 16 by 16, I guess it only affects the player in their movement, which is fair enough, but it's just something I found. There is obviously other ways to do this. I was thinking, you know, after I did this, I was thinking that maybe when you come into a top-down 2D scene, we could hide the actor that you're trying to move and use the player as the, you know, the thing moving, and set the player to the correct, you know, sprite, and then move the player as they would normally move. But for simplicity's sake, I decided to just stick with the actors that are always the actors. Yeah, and speaking about the actors, I also found that this, like, smart AI is hard. I found it that, obviously, if I was to be here and this to be here, the most optimum way for this dino to get to me is first move here, then move up here. But because of the way it goes left, right, up, down, or down, up, I think, left, right, down, up, it means that it would move here, and then move here, and then move here. So it isn't very smart, and it means that there will be some, like, weird things, like weird choices that it takes, that obviously if it was a human being, it would know what the optimum is, but because it's not a human being, it makes it look stupid in a way. And you can obviously overcome that by balancing it differently, like making the dino move faster than you or something, you know. If you noticed, I balanced it so that the dino moves less than us, but has more health. We both have the same damage output, but obviously the range of the tank is increased. So if I had, in my first move, gone down here, and then obviously the dino starts here and moved up here, then we move down here, then the dino wouldn't have been smart and come around here. They would just try and go this way and then not be able to, and then basically don't move. So then we would come across here, and then we could basically snipe it from across the river, which arguably is a fun thing that is possible, but also highlights that the AI isn't smart. And I'm not an AI programmer. As you can see with this logic, it's just, you know, try and get closer. If you can't, then don't, basically. So if I was to do this, I would have to balance the dino. Maybe the dino can move across the water, but the player can't. Maybe the player can't go through the towns and also can't go through the trees. That would be an interesting balancing option. But like I said, you would have to have a different move map for each character that has different collision. Currently, these are just using the same collision, so it keeps it simple. So I think that's all of the wisdom I can bestow right now. This did take me a long time to figure out, but now I've got it down. I think, you know, I wouldn't want to expand on this unless you guys wanted me to, or if I had a game idea out of it. So yeah, if I had an idea for this, I would continue, but I'm obviously giving this to my patrons so they can do what they want with it. And I hope that by watching this video, it's kind of educated you guys on some of the downfalls and some of the things that you would have to consider if you're going to do this yourself. Obviously, this isn't the only way to do this. Like I said before, this technically could be in one map, but it might get too complicated. By splitting it up, it makes it very simple. And obviously, the more you split it up, technically, the more simple each map is. But obviously, this is only with 2 actors. With more, it can get very crazy, I think. So keep that in mind. And yeah, I'll put my patrons up on screen right now. Thank you very much to you guys, especially those who voted in that poll. I will be working on that shoot 'em up basics video next. I'm sorry this one took so long. I did have to learn a lot for this. But I hope it's worth it. I hope you guys enjoy the files, at least looking over how I did it. I tried to comment a few things, but it's not perfect. But yeah, like the video if you like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Please comment on what you want to see next and what you thought of this, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.